Asheville, Minnesota, Las Vegas, and then there's Owensboro right there. So we've slipped into the pack. So later this spring, we're hoping to put a real big campaign behind that. And hopefully economic development and our chamber will join us. It's, you just can't buy that type of national exposure. And so we'll try to capitalize on that. So big year ahead for us.
I want to go ahead and make a comment, if I may.
Sure.
I'm a little more connected to Mark's group, and I want to just say to you that because I'm a liaison for the CVB, and I just want to commend you for the job. I know y'all initiated the whole basketball tournament that we just had, the 2A, and I appreciate the things y'all are doing. I know you're doing a really nice job, and if you pass on to your staff,
Well,
we commend them for the job y'all are doing and increasing the activity here in Owensboro-Daviess County.
Anything else? Commissioners, anything else? Mark, thank you for a job. I see we're busting at the seams. If we can ever get the third hotel downtown, we can then bring the Kentucky Association of Counties here. We can bring the judge executives here. We can, but you know, until we get that third hotel, it's going to be tougher to get the larger conventions here.
holding us back a little bit.
I mean, it will change the landscape of the convention business in this community. So thank you for what you do. Thank the staff, and then a big thanks to the board as well. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Jenny, next item.
C, Treasurer's Report for December 2018.
Mr. Hendricks.
Cash balance December 31st is $30,006,866. General fund $10,963,619. 6 months through the fiscal year, all funds and cash balances are operating within budgeted expectations.
Commissioners, any question of the treasurer? If not, the report will be on file in our offices here. You're welcome to come in and see. Mr. Treasurer, I noticed that you weren't in your office today. There must have been a good reason.
Absolutely.
That's what I thought. Kelly, Mr. Hendricks' wife, is celebrating her 29th birthday today. That's what you told me anyway. And she's got to be younger than that. So, Kelly, I know you don't watch. You're not the nerd that most of us are up here. So.
I wouldn't have married her if she was watching.
That's exactly right. But happy birthday. And Jim, tell her that was our birthday present, that we didn't announce her real birthday.
She'll appreciate it.
We didn't do that to her. So, all right, next item.
2, consideration for approval, A, minutes of the January 10th, 2019 court meeting.
Motion approved.
Second.
I have a motion second. Commissioners all had a copy of the minutes in your possession for some time. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
B, all claims for all departments.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion second. Again, Commissioners, you've had a copy of the bills that are due and payable to the Daviess County Fiscal Court in your possession for some time. Any question of the treasurer? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
C, annual contract with SentryHealth.
Motion approved.
Second.
I have a motion second, Mr. Hendricks.
Yes, gentlemen, this is a third amendment to a contract that we originally started with Edumedics, is now called SentryHealth. Basically, this is to extend a service for an additional 1 year, 12 months, and the rate structure is altered. However, it will result in approximately the exactly same annual expenses. I reviewed it. It appears to be in order. As a reminder, this program is an employee benefit. It is available to our employees who wish to take advantage of it. If they have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or diabetes, those need special looks and a lot more time allocated than some doctors have perhaps in an office visit. So we've made the resource available to employees that they can get added counseling and advice and suggestions, medicine, treatment, whatever. So I recommend approval.
Commissioners, any question or comment? Question or comment to the public? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
D, award RFQ 001 2019, 6 sets of turnout gear for the fire department.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and second. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Judge, this is an annual replacement of personal protective equipment for the Davis County Fire Department, including 6 sets of turnout gear comprised of coats, pants, and suspenders. The fiscal court received 3 quotes. We're recommending the lowest quote submitted by FDSAS in the amount of $14,190. This was a budgeted item. I recommend approval.
Question or comment, Commissioners? Turnout gear, helmets, boots, protective clothing that our firefighters wear when they turn out to fight a fire or go to an emergency situation. Pretty expensive stuff, about $2,500 an outfit. So it's and I can't remember exactly what the length of service there are, but it's not an unlimited amount of length. It has to be replaced on a regular basis, the best I remember. Any other question or comment? Question or comment by the public? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
E, surety bond release for Lake Forest Units 15, 20, 23, 27, 28, 32, and 33.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and second. Mr. Brasher?
My office has reviewed all these requests and found that the public improvements were installed per our specifications. I recommend approval.
Question or comment by the commission? Are all of these 100% release, or are some of them to just a reduction in the bond?
I believe there are 3 of them that are being requested that are just simply reductions. The rest of them are complete releases.
Okay. Any other question or comment? Question or comment by the public? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
F, second reading of KOC 220.31 2019, and ordinance authorizing and directing the rebate of 0.35% of all occupational license fees due and payable to Davis County, Kentucky by ordinance from the salaries, wages, and other compensation to be paid by the new employees of CAB Access LLC, provided that said corporation meets the criteria set forth in its application for incentives under the Kentucky Economic Development Finance Authority Kentucky Business Investment Program.
I need a motion, Commissioner.
Approved. Second.
I have a motion and second. Commissioners, Mr. Smith explained this to us last meeting. This is our second reading. David, would you just briefly tell us what we're doing here?
Yes, Philip Crabtree's organization came to us and the state a little over a year ago to get incentives to expand their operations and begin a new business. That company's name now is called CAB Access. The county had agreed to devote money out of its economic development fund. They also went to the state regarding the state incentive program. In order to max out this state incentive program, we have to give up our occupational taxes. And so this, once they get ready to go final with the state that they've done the expansion to the number of jobs they promised the state, then we need to pass an ordinance for the state before they would agree to release it.
Question or comment by the commission? Question or comment by the public? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
3, consideration for appointment A, Suzanne Cecil-White to the West Davis County Water Board, term 1/17/19 to 1/17/2023.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and second. Commissioner Suzanne Cecil-White will be taking the position formerly held by Paula Crabtree. Ms. Crabtree served 2 terms. I want to thank her for her service in the past and thank Ms. White for the service going forward. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
B, Major Barry Smith to the Davis County ASAP Board, term 1/1/19 to 1/1/2023.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and second. Commissioners, Major Smith has served on the ASAP board for a couple terms. Typically, we don't go past 2 terms, but in this case, Mr. Smith has done such a good job, and we wanted to reward him by another term on that board. So, any question or comment? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
4, consideration for discussion A first reading of KOC 921.673, 2019, an ordinance amending the zoning classification of a 20.150 acre tract of land and a 2.932 acre tract located at 5030 and 5060 Newbolt Road from R1A single family residential and AU urban agriculture to AU urban agriculture, application filed by David Buckner and David Lee Buckner.
Commissioners, this is the first reading. We don't need a motion or anything like that. We will actually have our second reading at our meeting February. 21st. Who? 21st. No. 5th?
5th, correct.
Is that the correct date? You might check them. Tuesday, and it's on a Tuesday. It's a little different. Normally it would be on that Thursday, but because we have some training that's taking place Thursday, we moved it back to Tuesday. What we're going to do this evening is the OMPC, the Planning Commission, heard a request for rezoning, and they took testimony from those folks wanting the rezoning. There were some folks there who opposed the rezoning. Both sides presented what they thought was a good argument. The zoning staff presented finding of fact that this zoning complied with the comprehensive plan, and there were some other things that were made a part of the record. Tonight we have Brian Howard here from Planning and Zoning to answer our questions. What we will do is actually make a decision on the appeal based on the record, the facts that are presented in the record and only the record. We could find our own finding of fact if we wanted, but our job tonight is to, or our job between now and our next meeting is to determine, did the zoning commission, based on the facts presented by the staff, did they make a correct decision? Now, Claude, the ordinance is in the affirmative. We always write these in the affirmative. A vote no on the affirmative would in effect overturn the Planning Commission's finding. Is that correct? Okay. One of the things I would tell you too, we are not bound by the Planning Commission when they do a rezoning. When they do a rezoning, they really do not add, or Brian can't add any conditions to that zoning. Isn't that pretty much the case? I mean, generally, we could say, you know, we would like to see this or that to our, as a result of us finding for or against, these are the things that we would like to see added. And if you recall, we've done that. We did that when we had the rezoning appeal of the Pleasant Ridge Coal Mines. We did that when we had the zoning appeal of the Lake Forest, the subdivision out near Lake Forest. So what I would propose to do right now, we know what's going on. Brian, if you would approach the podium, I would like perhaps for you just give us a brief summary of your finding of fact, of where we went from what to what, and then if the commissioners have any questions or I have any questions, we'll ask you. Then I'm going to allow each side 5 minutes to make a statement. I think Mr. Stevenson is the attorney for the Buckners, and I assume, Mr. Stevenson, you will be speaking. Mrs. Johnson is here. I met with Mrs. Johnson earlier. As a matter of fact, I've been to both places and looked at that thing. But I met with Mrs. Johnson, and she's a little nervous tonight, but I told her I have her a shot of wild turkey up here, and that Commissioner Castlen would come out and hold her hand if she needed that. She wondered about her husband speaking, and Mr. Stevenson said he didn't have a problem with that as long as we're not adding any new testimony, new facts. But certainly, I think she has decided she's going to stand up and do it. So, and I appreciate that. Please don't be nervous. We don't bite. Although Austin will be out there recording every word you say, and it will be reported in the newspaper. We don't know that it'll be reported the way you say it, but it will be reported. Brian, would you kind of lead us, tell us what went on here?
Yes, sir. So we received an application for rezoning, went to the November 2018 OMPC meeting. Basically, as Ms. Warren stated in the agenda item, it's about 23 acres, 2 parcels. There's some split zoning on the parcels, so it had some R1A single-family residential and AU urban agriculture. The intent was to, in the application, was to eliminate that split zoning, get everything under one agricultural zone.
Let me interrupt you. How did that happen? Because generally we don't allow that.
Split zoning?
Yes.
So we see more split zoning than we would like. When the initial zoning was established in the late 1970s, what was often done along roadways in the rural area where there were single-family residences along the road frontage, they would often do an arbitrary zoning boundary around those single-family residences and then leave the bulk of the property around it in an agricultural zone. And so that's what appears happened in this instance.
Did they do that with B4 zoning? Did they do it with I-1 zoning? If they thought perhaps I-1 was going to be appropriate along, say, the bypass or a highway, they would just arbitrarily zone a portion of it.
There are examples out in the county where there was a country store or whatever, and you'll have on a larger parcel just a really small rectangle that's zoned commercial. In town, they would do things along railroad tracks. They would zone those properties industrial, even though there were single-family residences on it within, with the idea that could redevelop industrially.
So we had split zoning, 2 different properties. Did both properties have split zoning?
Just
the larger tract?
Just the larger parcel, if I remember, was the one that was split zoned. And so this was an application to eliminate the split zoning.
Which we like, we want.
Yeah, split zoning creates issues as far as what kind of setbacks and things are allowed then, and so it does eliminate those issues, certainly. So it went for the Planning Commission. Staff, as we always do, prepared a staff report. We recommended approval of the application. The Planning Commission, after hearing testimony at the meeting, recommended approval of the application by a 9-0 vote. As was stated, there was opposition there, and they spoke and addressed several comments to the Planning Commission. But again, after hearing testimony, they recommended approval. An appeal was filed, and then when an appeal is filed on a rezoning, it comes to the legislative body, in this instance, Fiscal Court, for you all to take final action on the item.
Okay. The proposal complies with the community's adopted comprehensive plan.
Yes.
What does that mean to a lot of people who are sitting out there? They go, "What in the world is that?"
Right. So the comprehensive plan is the guide for the development of our community, both now and into the future. A component of that is the land use plan, and that's what we use to evaluate rezoning requests. And it is basically a formula. Every bit of property in Davis County is in a plan area, and you can go to multiple zones within each plan area if you meet a certain set of criteria. So in this instance, as we reviewed the criteria, it is in compliance. And the criteria that were applicable here were that the property had to have frontage on a public road, which it does on Newbolt Road, and that the parcels are large enough to meet the requirements for septic systems.
3/4 of an acre minimum.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so as Ms. Warren stated, one parcel was approximately 20 acres, other was approximately 3, and so it meets those requirements.
Now, in urban agricultural, it's a residence is a permitted use.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Right. In an AU zone, the principally permitted uses that we see most often are some form of agricultural operation, row crops, barns, that kind of thing, livestock potentially, and single-family residential uses.
Okay. Commissioners, do any of you have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Tell me the difference between an R1A and a AU.
So R1A is a single-family residential zone. Then AU is an urban agricultural zone. So the AU zone will allow agricultural operations and things like that, which often go beyond the scope of what's allowed in an R1A zone. I mean, that's the primary difference. It does allow those agricultural type uses.
So, based on that definition, number 4 here, as far as the finding of facts, why is that important? It seemed like that would have been important going the other way, going to residential.
What, that at 20.150 acres and 2.932 acres, that the lots are large enough to satisfy or have a septic system? Yeah, that's just one of the comprehensive plan statements or requirements in order to zone. Really, either direction you go,
Either one.
in R1A or AU. If they had attempted to go to R1A for the entire parcel, that would have been that same statement would have been on there.
It just kind of confused me because
Yeah, basically,
I thought that was looked like a requirement for residential.
it is, but as the judge said, a single-family residential use is
They're permitted
in the zone
on
as
the
well. So,
AU.
yeah, the intent there is just to make sure that if a parcel is rezoned to whatever, that it's going to be large enough to have enough space on it to have a septic system.
Okay. Was that it, Commissioner?
That's it.
Commissioner, any question?
Well, I guess what I would ask is, except for the applicant having a desire to do something different than is already being done, is that the only reason that someone would come and do one of these rezonings when there's a split zoning?
Often you can clear up zoning, get rid of that split zoning. Sometimes they have something that they want to do on the application. They submitted, they said they want to do agricultural use. Beyond that, I don't know what their intent is now or in the future.
Okay.
Probably would make it easier to sell if you had a single zoning as opposed to a split zoning as well. I mean, split zonings muddy things up. Commissioner, any question?
No.
Okay. John, Counselor, do you have any questions of Brian? Well, Brian, don't leave. Do you have any questions of him while we got him? Ms. Johnson, would you guys have any questions of him? Okay. Then Brian's going to be here, and he will answer or clear up any questions that we might have. Ms. Johnson, since you folks filed the appeal, I will allow you to come forward, and you have 5 minutes, Jenny, if you would time it to say, try not to introduce anything that wasn't talked about at the zoning meeting. And this court, what we're going to try to do is look at those findings of fact and make sure that the Planning Commission made a correct decision based on those findings of fact. So introduce yourself, please. And if you would, pull the mic down a little bit, and that way we can hear you. Okay?
First of all, my name is Renee Johnson. I live at 5068 New Boat Road. First, I want to thank the Lord for being able to stand here and speak my grievance. Also, I want to thank the court. I understand that the past is not what we're here today for, but the past does show me the Buckners have done what they wanted to when they wanted to, with no concern of the law or others. For instance, there's a fence to the front that shows this fact to zoning, because it's already violating zoning by not being 60 feet from the road, and it's taller than 3 feet high. And if they would have checked before they put it up, they would have found that out if they would have asked somebody or something. So I also understand I stand here alone in my grievance because the lights are not an issue. They have mega lights on their property. But they are an issue to me and to others. More than one neighbor's complained to Brian Howard. And they were all shut down to the point that they felt that there was no need to go to the public meeting because lights are not an issue with zoning. Even other neighbors that wasn't invited to the public meeting, because only the land that borders the property gets the invitation, these lights affect them and they have complaints on them also. I've even been asked if there was a baseball field over there because the lights are so bright. It has changed what I can and can't do on my property as far as my backyard. There's no privacy as far as building a new home, pole barn. I mean, my backyard is lit up. I think if zoning was changed, it could affect my property more. This and always has been a nice neighborhood. I grew up on this land and I owned it before Lee seized the property of 5060 New Boat Road. What they're currently doing on 5030 New Boat Road, zoned R1A, is not residential, just residential living. The lights coming from the land has been a big change. There has been, they have them on sometimes as much as 3 to 4 times a night weekly, sometimes as late as 11 p.m. You all have a photocopy there. There's an aerial view. There's a small dirt area that was grandfathered in when they zoned it. When they did the split zoning back in the 70s, it was allowed. It was grandfathered in. My understanding of what grandfathering should be or is that you back away. You don't improve it and make it bigger. It was said in the meeting, public meeting, that it's unfortunate that the 2 barns are on R1A zoning. Why? Because you don't have to pull a permit if you change it to RAU, which you don't. What's unfortunate, in my opinion, is how it's changed this neighborhood. Their attorney also stated that they just have 5 horses. That's a lot for R1A zoning. And their new arena that they put in, they rope cattle in. So it's not just horses, it's cattle. I have talked, I think what's going on with David Buckner's area is wrong for R1A zoning. I think it should already maybe be a violation. And if they change it to AU, they'll become legal. Whatever they do over there or whatever they've done will be legal. This is, in my opinion, this is more of a matter of covering the rear and the ability to do more without permits and concerns with others that might impact the neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Okay. You can have a seat for just a second. Brian, would you come back up for just a second? How far away from the road, when you said split zoning, I'm going to assume that R1A is the portion nearest the road?
Right.
How far from the road does R1A extend? Do you have any idea? Just an estimate.
If memory serves, just looking at the property identification map that's included in there, maybe about 600 feet back from the road.
Okay, so R1A 600 feet back, and then it would be AU?
For the rest of it,
Okay.
yes. And that's a ballpark guess.
Sure, and I understand that. Whether it's R1A, AU, or split zoning, whatever they do there, they will have to permit it. There's going to be a permit for a requirement. I know you're going to have to require the permit the electrical. You have to permit the septic tank. You would have to permit any HVAC. The only thing that might be exempt if it were on a farmstead would be the plumbing permit. Building code.
The building code does allow a farm exemption of an agricultural, or a structure on an agricultural parcel.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Stevenson.
Could I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Brian.
With regard to the lighting that Ms. Johnson mentioned.
Right.
Is there a requirement on the lighting or a limitation on how much lighting people can have?
There is not.
I know when I was growing up, it was common for people to have a security light, you know, but I understand their use of this arena is different than that.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, in this instance, no. The zoning ordinance does not have a lighting. We don't have a lighting ordinance. Some communities have one that, the convenient gas station stores that have all the light, that you have to do studies and provide how many foot candles of light are being generated, but our ordinance does not do that.
If you went, I'm sorry, Commissioner, if you went outside and said the zoning passed, there wasn't anything there, then somebody came in and they said, we want to build X and it's going to have lighting.
Right.
So they would submit a development plan and you guys would review it. Is there a lighting ordinance then, or is there a lighting requirement?
The zoning ordinance has a very limited statement that basically says when you have a commercial use that adjoins residential, then lighting should be directed away from the adjoining property.
Okay.
And that's as far as it goes. It doesn't address anything from say an agricultural, residential perspective. It's in a commercial zone or industrial zone.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yes,
go ahead.
Only on the lighting, my question, is there a time that the lighting would have to be shut off? Sometimes in other areas where it's a ball team playing, I think there's a certain time, whether it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, don't know for sure. Is there any restriction of that in a kind of a neighborhood like that?
That's not a zoning ordinance requirement. There may be a nuisance ordinance. Both in city and county may have those, but that's not anything we enforce. I do know we've had a conditional use permit. I remember within the last couple of years, it was on a church parcel where they were putting in a baseball field, and neighbors came and had concerns about light. And the Board of Adjustments has the ability to limit hours on lighting for a conditional use permit, but the Planning Commission doesn't on the zoning change.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions? Mr. Stevenson, if you would just wait a second. Ms. Johnson, would you mind coming back up for a second? In your opinion, is this arena being operated in a commercial use? Are they selling tickets? People are coming up there? Do you see crowds up there?
I've seen people, I've seen and increased activity, but no, it's not as far as like selling.
Okay, so you wouldn't classify as a commercial use. Do those lights that you're talking about, do they shine directly on your home?
No, I'm actually very fortunate. If you look at the aerial view that y'all have there, my house kind of sits behind their new home that they've built, and doesn't shine directly on the back.
And don't you sit at the base of a hill? You actually have cut into the side of the hill and have a little retaining wall in your backyard?
We just put that in last year, but yes.
Okay. And then on the side where the arena is there a row? I know there's a row of cedar trees that Commissioner Castlen looked at when he was out there, and then there's a higher row of pine trees that kind of shade between the existing home and your home.
Yeah, I personally, the way I am by nature, I like the privacy, and I've planted several trees and working on planting on trees.
So the lights do not shine directly on your house, but if you looked over, you would see them.
Oh yeah, you can definitely tell whether they're on or off when you walk out my front door.
How far out into your backyard would you have to walk before you could look out in that direction? So you're walking out toward your backyard, neighbor's house is over here. How far out would you have to go before you could look over and directly see one of the lights?
It'd probably be about 5-10 feet past the wall that we built.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner.
The trees that he mentioned, are they on your property or your neighbor's property?
The large pine trees that are pine trees that you've seen, they were there by the previous owners before the Buckners, so they existed for years there.
Okay.
But all the new trees, I've personally planted for privacy and privacy.
Okay.
Thank you. Any commissioners, anything else while we've got it back up? Okay, sit down. You're doing excellently well. You couldn't tell you're nervous at all. Mr. Stevens, Counselor Stevenson, Stevenson, what the devil? What's the difference when you lawyers get involved? Sorry, Paul, you're an exception.
We'll just start calling him Mr. Madding.
Hey, that's Mr. Mad. Sometimes I get that way.
Well, I know it. I call him at Acme at 6:30 in the morning.
But that's a good thing because I get to get money from you instead of you getting it from me. Okay.
Thanks for my next 5 minutes.
You got it.
Not a lot of comments.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd simply like to point out, Ms. Johnson indicated that the lights don't affect her. And that horse ring, and that's what it is, has been there for decades. David Johnson's grandson and David and Summer's son races or in rodeos, and they have 5 horses. And he's a teenager, 11. He's not even a teenager. And so he practices, he does barrel races, and he practices the horses in that ring. I just asked Lee how late, he said sometimes 10 o'clock, but never past 10. It's a private use. It's been there for eons. Behind the horse ring is also a barn. Now, Ryan was talking about split zoning. This was all agricultural until the early 70s when planning and zoning just simply decided to make the house R1, and they went further back. They went back behind the barn, which doesn't make any sense, but they took in the ring, the barn, and the house as R1. The rest of it is agricultural. So Mr. David Buckner just simply wants to make it consistent and eliminate the split zoning. Nothing's going to change. The barn's going to be there. It's been there since the 50s. Nothing is going to change. Now, Lee, I call him Lee, David and Summer Buckner lives next door between his father and Miss Johnson. Their house is built, and it is R1. But behind, there's a tract of land, 6.9 acres behind that they own, which is agricultural. So they sort of have a split zoning as well. They're just simply wanting to make it all agricultural. And nothing is going to change. But he has 4 or 5 head of cattle, been there for years. He'll be able to, he can maybe actually run the cattle a little closer because David and Summer have a barn also on their property. And he could use that barn for more agricultural purposes since it's now in R1. No, it is in ag. It is in ag. But simply to eliminate that because they own the adjacent property. It's never been consolidated, but it's still like a split zoning. Nothing's going to change. They're just trying to eliminate this confusion and to have it all agricultural. Brian explained it very well. Unfortunately, I don't know that height of fences and lighting and all of this, and Ms. Johnson's down admitted it doesn't really bother, has nothing to do with the rezoning of the property. It might be another issue to be addressed, but nothing to do with the rezoning. So consequently, I would respectfully request this court to approve the planning and zoning decision, and so that the Buckners can move forward.
Mr. Stevenson, do you know how many head of cattle they run there?
8 cows and a bull. 8 cows and a bull.
Okay. They use the ring to rope cattle, is that correct? Would you say yes or
yes,
no?
Yes.
Okay. Do they rope those 8 cows and the bull? Or are there other...
You want to go up? Come on up. I'm going to let Lee.
Oh, that's, I mean...
Because I don't know much about bulls.
That'd be all right, don't you think?
Just introduce him. And
yeah,
okay.
Just bring
this
up...
This is David Lee Buckner.
Okay.
He's one of the applicants.
Okay. Yeah, your name and address for the record.
David Lee Buckner, 5060 Newbolt Road.
So this ring you're doing, it's for your kids?
Yeah, we ride horses.
Okay. So, and this is kind of like the Wild West where we're roping and doing all those kinds of things, and then you go to competition and...
Yeah, it's not exactly the Wild West. It's controlled.
Well, with Commissioner Castlen, I asked him if he wanted to get on one of the cows and ride it, and he said, not by the hair of your chin.
I've got one. I'd like to see it if you do.
Yeah. It's only your kids? You don't have any other people there?
Occasionally, some of my son's friends will come over.
Okay, but they're not there. You're not teaching. You're not training. You're not.
No.
Okay, you're not doing any of that. Do you keep the cows in the barn?
No, typically not. The cows are in the back.
Okay.
Do
you keep the horses in the barn?
Yes, the horses come in the barn every night.
Okay.
And every day during the summertime.
The vast majority of the land out there, and I probably asked Brian to come back, but is it agricultural?
All around me, yes, it's agriculture, and on the other side of Mr. May, it's
so behind you is ag, up and down the road, and Brian, I guess
directly across the road is ag as well.
Is ag.
Yes.
So they just arbitrarily picked out places where homes were and said, we're going to call this residential. And if there wasn't a home, they would just zone it all agricultural. So you're nodding your head, yes. Okay. Commissioners, any question or comment?
I'd like to get him to show me where the ring is on this map.
Sure.
Can you show me this map?
Yeah.
Where is the ring?
Yeah. Brian, I need you up there for just a second too. Any other question of Mr. Stevenson or Mr. Buckner?
I guess.
Yes.
I would ask a question. By doing both of these properties, is your intent to expand what you do and lay out if we call it a footprint of your ring right now, do you anticipate growing that or no?
No, there's no room to grow it. It is what it is.
Okay. Any other question? Hey, you guys can have a seat. Brian, hop up there for just a second.
Yes, sir.
When zoning was introduced into Davis County and they went through and they just arbitrarily zoned R1A, AU, was there any restriction placed on anything that was taking place then? By that I mean, was the restriction, you can't increase it, you can't decrease it, you can't change it, or was it simply stated that whatever can go on in those zones and continue to go on in those zones, and if you increase it, you increase it? If you remember Ms. Johnson's statement about, grandfathering should go back as opposed to expanding.
Right. Yeah, and anytime you have an existing non-conforming use, the ordinance says that you cannot increase the scope of that operation, that business, whatever it may be. So that is, I think that's a correct statement, that you shouldn't increase it. If you decrease the nonconformity, that's fine. You can't enlarge it or increase the nonconformity.
Okay, but did it become a nonconforming use because when zoning was accepted in Davis County, it was arbitrarily zoned outside of a zone that it could exist?
Right, yeah, so when zoning was first applied, and I'll be honest, people will occasionally do that to themselves today. There may be parcels, we've seen some rezonings, speculative rezonings, where someone could rezone to, let's say, B4, and you have single-family residence on there. That property may not develop for 10 years, so you zone yourself into a non-conforming situation.
Right.
If you come in and try and get a building permit to increase the
Can't do
an
it.
addition on the home, to build a detached garage, you can't do it because it's a non-conforming use
Okay.
at that point.
Typically, and this is a question you probably can't answer, you guys do code enforcement and zoning enforcement. Do you recall any complaints by the neighbors out there?
Yeah, we do zoning enforcement, and no, we did not have any record of any complaints on that, and we do that on a complaint-driven basis.
Right.
We certainly don't have the staff to drive around
No.
the city and county looking for problems.
We do the same thing with our property maintenance guy. If you complain, we go and address it, but if you don't, it's gonna go that way.
Right.
Claude, a lot of the issues I'm hearing out there, they're civil issues.
Yes, Judge. Lighting, fencing, would be both civil. We do not have a direct ordinance concerning lighting. It could be considered a nuisance depending on time, but if it's done by 10 o'clock at night, that's generally the time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think that unless the commissioners have anything else that they would like to ask, I think that's all we need to know. We will take the time. I know at least two of us have visited properties, I'm sure. Yes, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question, and maybe a shake of your head to answer it. But I asked, did you expect did you have any anticipation of expanding the footprint? And you said no. Do you believe your lighting is sufficient today, or do you anticipate ever adding lighting? And if you're going to say more than a yes or no, then
Let me just make something clear to you all. No neighbor ever brought any complaints to me about lighting at all until we applied for zoning. Okay, nobody ever asked me about it. And so what I've done, and I've told the other neighbors, and I haven't told them, but I'm going to put shields on the lights to try to keep down any over glare.
okay.
It's my plan. I had no intention of disturbing anybody. I just want to be able to do, what we do on our property. That's
Sure.
it.
Okay.
Oh, no, not going to add any more lights. I got plenty of light.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Claude, as a condition of the rezoning, now it's come before us in an appeal. Can we add restrictions? Can we change things? Do we have the authority? I know we've done it in the past.
We have, I guess the question is what is the condition? So
Well, and again, I don't know, and without talking to both parties, I would not want to speculate now, but between now and then, I think it probably would be appropriate to approach both parties and see if they could live with any conditions that the commission might think would be appropriate. Would you
yes, I think
say?
there are certain kinds of conditions that basically comply with the ordinance and were not something that was not either introduced or discussed during the zoning meeting. That yes, we would be able to make that.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, anything? You can have a seat. Anything else? Folks, we will, and make sure, Jenny, it is the 5th.
Yeah, I checked it.
Okay, so on the 5th, we will have our second reading. At that time, we are not going to hear anything. We may come out with some conditions that would be added. We may not do anything. We may just vote on the ordinance as it is. Probably, if we would add conditions, we would contact both parties and talk about what we may or may not do in that time. So, if there's no other questions by the board, then we'll move to the next item. Thank you guys for being here.
B, first reading of KOC 621.18, 2019, an ordinance relating to the Davis County Road, Bridge, and Street System.
Commissioners don't need a motion or a second. I'm going to ask County Engineer Brasher, tell us a little bit what we're doing and why we're doing it.
I try to bring an updated road index to fiscal court about once a year. It reflects the development that normally happens throughout a calendar year. This road index reflects about approximately 2 miles of county roads that will be added to the county maintenance. Majority of that is due to about 3 subdivisions. Deer Valley.
New streets.
New streets.
Right.
Deer Valley has developed quite a bit. Whispering Meadows has filled out quite a bit also, and Sterling Park off of Reed Road. So those have all been approved and surety released, and it is time to get that on our road index so we can properly maintain those.
So the roads were built according to our public improvement specs. We've inspected, and we are now accepting them into the road index so that if any maintenance needs to be done, we can expend money. Yes, sir.
Do we have a requirement that a neighborhood is being developed, like I think you call it Doe Valley, that it be built out to a certain percentage of the total lots before we accept a road, or can they ask us to accept it as soon as they get it built?
Typically what we'll do is we will hold their bond until they put the top surface on. There are certain occasions that they may want to put that surface on before we think it is ready, or we're willing to take it over for maintenance. And we will hold a maintenance bond. As long as we got some sort of bond, we don't officially take it over. So that's what's happened over the last 12 months is Fiscal Court has released those sureties. I don't want to bring you a road index every time we release a small amount of road, so I gather it up over the year and bring it to you one time. But yes, I think we do have the ability, if they want to put the surface on and they have a significant amount of work on the next unit, and this is their way to get to the next unit, we would maybe not release, or I won't recommend releasing all of that surface even though it has been placed, or we do release the surface, but we keep enough of the maintenance bond so that we don't take it over, and they understand that. Okay. So once the surface is down and we release all the surety is when I put it on the list temporarily, and then about this time every year I bring it to Fiscal Court for approval.
And when you say you release even the maintenance, so there's we don't hold any bonds on it at this point.
There's that transition where we used to keep sidewalk, and we made that change several years ago, so we may take over the road even though some of the sidewalks are not put in, so there may be sidewalk surety for some of the older subdivisions, but anything newer we don't take sidewalk surety. So when we release the surface, typically that's everything.
Okay, thank you.
I think you answered the question that I was going to ask. So 6 months ago they completed the road top surface. We inspected, said, yep, meets all our specs. Here's your bond back. And I thought I heard you say we put it on a temporary index. Correct. Before you bring it. I mean, officially, we don't accept it until we vote on it. But this temporary index clause means that we could perform maintenance on it if it was necessary.
If that arose before.
Right. Okay, before formally taking it. That was my concern. Are they in limbo?
My understanding is once we release it, I think the county engineer's office has the ability to put it on
temporary. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other question or comment? Yes, sir.
I just have a curiosity question. This column that is the route number. How come these new roads don't have a route number?
Good question. Route numbers are dictated by Frankfurt. So we have to adopt them as official county roads. Then we send this list to Frankfurt. They then populate the route numbers. And then once I have that is when I make the final copy and send it to Jenny Warren for filing. So
thanks, sir.
You're approving the road and everything, but they do have to give us the numbers once they are official county roads.
Commissioner, I thought everyone knew that.
You're wrong again.
Good question. I had no idea. Anything else? All right, Jenny. Next thing I see a green snake crawling around under this dais.
C, other business be brought before the Daviess County
Any?
No, sir.
Okay, next.
D, public comment.
Public comment, this is time during which we invite the public to come forward to the podium, identify themselves, and you're welcome to speak on anything other than what was on the agenda. No takers.
E, comments by Davis Fiscal Court.
Commissioners, just a couple comments here. First of all, you will notice under E, we're going to advertise bid number 05-2019, Horse Fork Creek Park Storage Building Roof Replacement for the parks. I think we're actually going to ask for 2 different bids. Isn't that correct? A metal roof and a regular asphalt roof. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson? He's nodding his head, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we're also going to advertise bid number 07-2019, a new or used forklift for the transfer station. So you will put those bids out in the next, hopefully we'll have something, in the next 30, 45 days?
At the next meeting, yes.
Next meeting, well, that's 30, 45 days within. So the other thing, and Commissioner Wathen, you were there at the OCTC ribbon cutting last night, and I just happened to bring this little gizmo. I finally got there after going to the right place downtown instead of the one out on 231. They have just installed an up-to-date, state-of-the-art, automatic, electronic production station where they can make parts and pieces, and this little thing was put together. They even have a robot. Did you see that?
I did.
I don't know what we're going to name. We're going to have to.
The robot has already been named, but I don't remember the name.
Hal. They call him Hal. Did he cut the ribbon?
The robot cut the ribbon.
Well, I asked him to bring me a Mick Ultra, and he did not. But then I stood in front of him, and that little sucker ran right up and just stopped. And when I moved out of the way, he continued to do it. It was pretty cool, and this will allow those students in manufacturing in particular to get hands-on experience in working on these machines. It was really cool. So OCTC continues to do great things for this community and preparing kids for 21st century jobs. As I said, our next meeting, February 5th. What are you grinning about?
I still don't know what that thing's for.
Oh.
Is that just a widget that we use?
No, this is actually supposed to be a phone case. Wasn't that what they said it was? Like a cell phone where they simulates the steps. Inside are some fuses.
I don't know. I wasn't there when they brought that up.
Okay. Anyway, that's what that little thing is. Don't, Jenny.
And I wondered when the robot came up to you, did it say get out of my way, or did it?
It did not.
Okay.
It kicked me in the shin.
Well, that was going to be the next thing. Did it?
All right. The green snake is down on. The green snake is down on Claude's end of the table. Commissioner Castlen, have you had any other words of wisdom?
No, sir. No, sir. Perhaps tomorrow.
Commissioner Colbert.
No, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Wathen.
I just want to add one little thing to comment about OCTC. I was talking, I think his name's Mike Rogers. He said that there's a lot of people with a lot of manufacturing companies in Owensboro currently that are sending their maintenance people to learn a lot of these robotics. So it's not only for the young, but it's for the people who already have some robotics in their industry.
Like I said, in my opinion, OCTC is one of the most progressive community colleges that we have, and really partner with the other colleges in our area. There's no other business to be brought before Davis County Fiscal Court without exception. We're adjourned.